All right, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call together the September 28th, 2023 school committee meeting. If you would rise and join me to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This evening we have a consent agenda posted, as well as the minutes from our September 14th, 2023 meeting and oath to bills and payroll. A motion to accept.
I move we accept.
Motion made by Elaine, seconded by
Second that.
Stacy. All those in favor. We have one Zoom participant tonight, so I think the protocol there is a roll call vote because we're not all in person. So, Jen.
Sorry, I had to step away for a second. I apologize.
We're just accepting the minutes, Jen.
Yes.
And Jen's
Jen votes yes.
Perfect. Stacy,
Yes.
Elaine.
I.
All right, and Justin is yes as well. So unanimous there. Thanks very much. So just for everyone's viewing and or on tape, Pino's not able to join us this evening, and we've got Jen Gold zooming in. So we have a quorum. This is our first opportunity for interested citizens. So if there's anybody with us this evening in the room or at home that would like to be heard or ask questions, now is your first opportunity. To be another opportunity at the end of the meeting.
We do not have any questions.
Right, perfect. All right, at this time, we have Jacinda Sanders as our second student representative here this evening. If you would give us a student representative's report, but before you begin, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
I'm Jacinda Sanders. I'm a senior at Wilson High School. I'm the captain of the field hockey team, and I dance right here in Wilson Elephants. For the school report, Shaker Lane said last week they had their first community meeting of the school year. It was an opportunity to talk all about important people at Shaker Lane that help out every day. They talked about the heart program and are creating little messages on how they can show heart around school. These will be displayed in the for everyone's review. At Russell Street, they're in full swing with academics. The fifth grade students and Mr. Gansenberg are really excited for the instruments to come in so they can start band. At the middle school, it's been pretty quiet this week, but the sixth graders have their first kids night out on Friday, October 13th from 5:30 to 7:30. There'll be $5 and it'll be Halloween themed. They also have their first 7th and 8th grade dance on Friday, October 27th. It's supposed to be so much fun. At the high school, October 14th is the PSAT for juniors and sophomores to prepare themselves for the real SAT. Tomorrow's the last home football game until the homecoming game, which will be on October 20th, with the homecoming dance to follow that Saturday, October 20th.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Job well done. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Clenchey, who has some other areas of recognition.
Thank you.
Welcome.
The Massachusetts School Superintendents Association had created an opportunity for superintendents to recognize high school students in their senior year for certificates of outstanding achievement. There are two criteria that are used in determining the recipients of this award. One would be a 3-year accumulated averages and class ranking. And I'd like to ask Dr. Harry to help with that as well. And it's with great pleasure that I have an opportunity to do this every year. We skipped a few years because of the pandemic, but we're back into a normal way of operating education again. So I'm going to ask each recipient to come up to the front. We'll congratulate you, present you with a certificate. And then if you go around the table and shake everybody's hand and then step to the front so we can take a group picture, that would be great. So our first recipient this evening is Nadia Pavlov. Congratulations, Nadia.
Congratulations.
Second recipient, Aria Satel.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations.
so much. Nice job, see you.
Thank you.
Right. We want to get everybody in the phone? Yes. And Steve, you got to take the pictures. We did.
We are gonna, you wanna sit around?
You want them in or at school?
Okay.
Sure.
You wanna get in?
Well, join in the thought. Sure.
We have Jen say something, so her face is in it too.
Oh, yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
That's right.
Make it nice.
Hello.
We got it.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and one more. All right, thank you.
That was quick. Congratulations again. So I'm on the agenda for the next item. I was going to stand up since I am standing up. We received some great news last week. I sent all of you a press release on the news about our middle school. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education recognized our middle school as one of the top achieving 66 schools in the state of Massachusetts. These schools were recognized for high achievement and strong growth. And that's all of the schools in Massachusetts. So it's pretty impressive. Very, very pleased and humbled by the recognition that our middle school is receiving. Special thanks to our students, our staff, and our families. And again, we have to remember that we build a foundation beginning in pre-K all the way up. So for families, students, and parents from pre-K on to grade 8, thank you for all your support and your hard work. And we are just so excited to be a recipient of this award. So congratulations. And I know Jason is with us tonight.
Yes, I'm here.
There you go, Jason. Going to give you a bit of time to tell us how you feel.
This is, it was very unexpected. To be in the top 4% of all schools in the state of Massachusetts and only one of maybe at most a half a dozen middle schools, just goes to show, what the hard work that we're doing at the middle school paid off. We really dedicated ourselves last year to rethink how we do MCAS, to eliminate the distractions, to focus back on the test, to really bring some seriousness to it without making it something that was so serious that the kids couldn't succeed under it. And you know what? The kids and the families, they warmed right up to it. And we had students, and this is the first time in my career of almost 25 years, where we had so many students at the end of the day still taking the test. They'd used their allotted time and needed more. I mean, it wasn't just usually 1 or 2 stragglers like we normally see. This was by the dozens, and it paid off in the scores. And so it's something that we're all very proud of. I really have to reach out and thank, first of all, our ELA department. They were the ones that really wanted to knuckle down and bring a new flavor to MCAS and something that could be more celebratory. And so as a school, we took that and ran with it, and it really seemed to pay off. But also, the scores are not just MCAS based; they're based on absenteeism and growth and everything else. So it's real nice to see that we're accomplishing what we had set out to do, and that feels real good to be recognized for that at the same time. So on behalf of our staff and students and families, I just, I'm thrilled. I'm over the moon to be able to bring this honor to Littleton.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, job well done, Jason. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last school committee meeting, we had praise for the high school, and this school committee meeting, we had the middle school. So if they started ranking elementary schools, we'd probably feel some pressure, but I don't think they do that. So awesome. We'll move on to the presentation portion of the evening. So we've got 2 scheduled before this evening. I've got advanced placement and also the map update. So we'll start with advanced placement. I think Keith Camo is going to take the lead on the presentation. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yep. Of course, thanks for having me.
You got it.
Good evening. Keith Camo, high school assistant principal, here to report on the AP results from this past year. So the first thing we'll do is recap the courses that we're offering at the AP level at the high school. As of this year, our probably 2 most popular courses are psychology and statistics. We have 2 sections of each of those. We have had computer science principles and A over the years. This year, computer science principles is running, A is not. We hope to bring it back next year. And AP macroeconomics, which was new last year, did not run this year. We had a change in staffing of the teacher who was teaching AP macro in order to properly prepare for a new teacher to teach that course. We want to give up by a year. But we added back AP Art History this year after a couple of years off. And so for a small school, we offer a pretty robust AP offerings. And on the next slide, we have a list of courses that students took AP exams in last year. And you'll notice that there are exam areas that we don't offer in terms of the courses. And one way that's happening is through our partnership with Virtual High School. We have a lot of students who are taking AP classes through Virtual High School. And there are also students who are taking AP courses in classes that we offer at the advanced level in world language, for example. We offer Spanish and Latin and French at the advanced level. We don't have the AP designation on those courses, but we have students who are taking the exams after completing those courses, even though they didn't take the AP designated curriculum. And so that accounts for some of the differences in this list as compared to the previous list. On the next slide, please, Steve. So this table we've seen, or we've all seen, I guess, over the years, and it shows the kind of some of the historical data of the number of students who are taking AP exams over the years and the number of exams taken. So obviously you'll notice that the number of exams taken is well above the number of students taking the exams. That's because students are taking multiple exams. We have some students who, stretch to take one exam, and we have some who are taking 3 to 4, sometimes 5 exams in a given year. And so as you can tell, the participation has gone up for a number of students over the years, with 127 students this past year taking at least one exam, and our exams taken up to 240, which is a dramatic jump from last year. Part of that is because over the past 2 years, as we kind of came out of the pandemic, there were some students who took the course and then decided not to take the exam for a variety of reasons. So we did see a giant increase in number of exams taken and the percentage of students who are actually taking the exams at the end of the course. On the next slide, you see the performance, and it is the percentage of exams at each AP score level. As a reminder, the AP scores from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 3 being determined as the passing score, in which the AP test becomes eligible for college credit. There's no guarantee that a student who scores a 3 or 4 or 5 on an AP exam will actually get the college credit. It's up to the actual individual schools, whether or not they'll award either credit or course credit or whatever they want to do with the AP scores. And so you can see over this past year, we had 55 student exams that were scored at a 5, 72 at 4, 58 at 3, and then 33 at 2, and 22 at 1. And so our passing percentage is 77% of the exams taken were at least a 3, which is that eligible for college credit, and 23% at the 5 level. On the next slide, again, we see the historical comparison of the percentage of scores at each level, going back to 2018. You can see on the right-hand side, that's where we got the most recent performance. And you can tell that we're pretty much in line with a couple percentage points of the passing scores being 77% of the scores, as opposed to last year's 81%. So a little bit below that most recent performance, but part of that is due to the fact we had a lot more kids taking the exams. And so some of the students who didn't take the exam last year may have gotten a 2 or may have gotten a 1. So the numbers are a little bit different, partly because of that. On the next slide, you'll see the same information, just in graph form and visual. Some of the visual learners. So it's the same information historically over the past 5 years of the number of exams at each AP score level. Again, these results include students who took multiple exams. This next one is the number of students with 3 or higher, so it's kind of drilling down on those passing scores. And you can see that this past year we had an increase in students who scored at least a 3 or higher over any previous year, and the percentage of total students 3 or higher at 82%. The next slide. The College Board has a program known as AP Scholars, in which students who take multiple exams and do well on multiple exams can be awarded with the AP Scholar or Scholar with Honor or Scholar with Distinction. It takes a combination of the average score per AP exam and also the number of exams taken. And so the definitions of each level are on the screen right now. And on the next slide, we have the number of students who achieved the AP Scholar and Scholar with Honor and Scholar with Distinction over the past 8 years. And so this past year, we had 21 AP scholars, 10 with honor, 8 with distinction, for a total of 39 AP scholars, which is an increase over the past 3 years, certainly. And it's the highest we've had since 2019. On the next slide, there's some summary notes, some highlights. Again, we have the 82% of students with at least 1-3. That represents 58% of our most recent graduating class scored a 3 or higher on at least one AP exam. And for context, what do those numbers mean? The College Board publishes results. And so at the state level, this past year, at 43.7% of students took at least one exam, and 30.5% of students got at least 1-3. That's in Massachusetts. Nationally, we had 34% of students took at least one exam, and 21% scored a 3 or better. So if you look at our scores, in town here, at 82% of our students scored at least 1-3 on an exam. We're well above the national average and well above the state average. In fact, our students are scoring 3s at a percentage about 20% higher than national students are taking exams. So the performance level is very high compared to the national average and the state average. 127 exams, 4s or 5s. I mentioned before we have stats and psych have 2 sections this year. I think between the 2 sections of psych, we're close to 60 students taking AP psych this year, and close to, I think it's 48 or 49 students taking AP stats this year. Those are our 2 highest subscribed AP courses this year. Over the years, you've seen some fluctuation in students taking stats, and AP Calc, for example, has had 2 sections over the past couple of years. AP Macro, which came in last year, we took a bye year this year because of the staffing change. I mentioned AP Art History was back this year after I think it's a 2-year hiatus. I mentioned before the World Language Department has shifted away from the AP, the curriculum designated by the College Board, and they've gone to a more proficiency-based instructional methodology. I think we've discussed that over the years with the curriculum updates, the world language decision to go that route. But we still have students taking the AP exams after completing the advanced Spanish, French, and Latin courses. And as a note for this year, we have 22 students taking AP course through VHS, which again helps supplement our course offerings. 12 of those students are through a federal grant. I have the acronym STEM AP. Get the other A. The STEM AP opportunity.
Opportunity had to be in.
The always opportunity, yeah, I think is I forget the second name, but it's a federal grant which is trying to encourage participation in STEM APs. And how that works for us through our partnership with VHS. This is all through VHS. The STEM grant. We purchase seats through VHS to help supplement our offerings, but the STEM grant actually pays for the student to take the class and also take the exam as well. So students enrolled in the STEM grant seats for the VHS courses will not have to pay for the AP exam. So we have 12 students taking either chemistry or computer science, it's all STEM field stuff.
I just Googled the cheats access.
Access. Yep. STEM AP access opportunity. So
Google's your best friend.
it's great. So that concludes the presentation for the evening. Any questions that you all have?
I missed the beginning. What were the state numbers?
The state numbers, 43.7% took at least one exam.
Of a graduating class?
Graduating
Okay,
class.
graduating class, yeah.
And 30.5 scored a 3 or better. 30.5% scored a 3 or better.
Okay, cool.
And national was 34.6 took an exam, and 21.6 was 3 or better.
Gotcha. Great. Anyone have any
Yeah,
questions?
I am stunned at the number of AP courses that are offered at Littleton High School for a school
Mhm.
this size. To have this many offerings is really stunning. So what an opportunity for our students. And so I was curious about how you support the students that are taking the tests that are not in those classes, but that's through the virtual high school.
Correct.
So do you sort of keep track of the trends of what students are interested in taking so that you're prepared with these offerings for them?
Yeah, in terms of the in-house offerings.
Yeah, or even like to align them with the
Sure.
VHS.
So, yeah, VHS has what they have. And so for the most part, they offer a wide variety of courses at the AP level, but also non-AP level. So we have a lot of students taking AP, VHS classes at the non-AP level, semester-long courses, year-long courses, whatever they are. And in terms of the in-house course offerings, we do regularly survey for student interest. Actually, most recently, we have added organic chemistry. It's not AP, but it's an advanced chemistry class that was entirely the result of student interest and also having a teacher that could teach the course, obviously. And we also offered this year a year-long environmental science course, which was through student interest. The other thing I didn't mention, again, talking about offerings for students and opportunities, is we also have a partnership with Middlesex Community College for dual enrollment. And so this year we've added environmental science and anatomy as dual enrollment options. And so we have at least one offering for dual enrollment credit through each department for the core subjects in world language.
Well, the kudos to the high school for staying on top of this. It seems like it's complicated because you have to manage it from two sides going in. But again, what a great opportunity for our students to engage in this high level work.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. Good work. The only question, so for the ones that aren't running in 2023, those are all the VHS, so the students can still have access to those?
Yes, yeah, so we have, I think, 4 or 5 students taking AP economics through VHS this year. They were all interested in taking macro with us. And because we didn't offer it, some of them are seniors and won't have a chance to take it next year. And the AP economics course through VHS is a combination of macro and micro. So we'll have some students who will take both the macro and micro AP exam at the end of this year after taking the AP econ course through VHS.
Awesome, great. I'm glad the kids have opportunities, great.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
Jen. Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Hey, that was a great presentation. I loved all the data. I was wondering if the AP statistics class helped you put that deck together.
You did our best.
No, it was really great. I have a question though. Do you have any sense? I mean, I echo what everybody said. Like, it's a super impressive lineup of AP classes, and the data points about the number of students taking the classes and the tests is really impressive. Do we have a sense of how that stacks up against other, high schools in our area, in the state, or in our more immediate area? Because it just seems really robust.
I would say that looking at some of the area schools, one thing that will happen is that they'll offer more courses just because they have larger faculties, like some of the Acton Boxborough, the Westfords, which have 3 times, 4 times the size of our school. They're going to offer more variety of courses. So that's why we are somewhat limited by our size, but we do supplement with the VHS and the dual enrollment opportunities and those type of things that offer more high level options for kids to take challenging coursework. I don't have the specifics of the local schools about participation rates. We can certainly try to find that through our connections with area, principals and curriculum coordinators at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would just be interesting for us to know as a benchmark, but it seems really impressive.
Yeah, we encourage our students to try to challenge themselves, at least in areas of interest and passion, to stretch themselves to take more rigorous courses, whether it's at the AP level or the dual enrollment level.
I echo what everyone said. I think it's wonderful that we have all these offerings. I think if there's a sort of a blemish anywhere, I think it's the result of students stretching for achievement, which I think we can all appreciate.
Yep.
So the fact that there's maybe 2023 wasn't as good as compared to years past, just because we've got kids trying harder,
Right.
Stretching for other exams where they may have shied away from in the past, which is obvious in the data because you sliced and diced it so many different ways. We're able to tell that. So thank you for doing that. And then it just maybe for those at home, like, it's wonderful that we offer all these AP courses. I just want to reiterate that, like, if you're not an AP student, you still have the opportunity to take all of the regular courses.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a wide variety of courses. I mentioned environmental science, which is now dual enrollment. We also offer, semester electives that are not at the AP level or honors level or CP level, whatever they are, to try to give opportunities for kids to pursue areas of interest. I think one of our more popular classes this year at the CP level is engineering. That's a class that had gone away for a couple of years and came back last year. We have engineering 1 and engineering 2, both of them around like 20 or 25 kids. So we do have a lot of opportunity for kids to take elective courses in areas of interest at all levels.
And I'm just curious, because I think this question got asked last year with all these offerings. I know it becomes like scale of economics, like we can't run a class if there's only a few, but I
Sure.
think there were a couple instances where historically we have run a class with smaller class size. I'm just curious, like off the top of your head, do you recall how small some of these classes are?
The AP courses,
Yeah,
I would say the smallest class that we have this year at the AP level, I believe, is art history with 8 or 9 students, might be 10, and then studio art as well, which is really a kind of a niche course, is smaller as well. We combine that with our portfolio prep course. It's in the same period, so we have the art portfolio class running, and then there are also students doing the AP studio course during that period as well. They're trying to, get creative a little bit sometimes.
sure. You're right. Sure. Well, thank you for all your hard work in this area.
Thank you.
All right, terrific. Great. Next, second presentation, it's the NWEA map update. Elizabeth Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning, will present a summary of the map growth testing results from the 2022-2023 school year.
Awesome. Thank you.
You got it.
We're just covering all the data points today.
Yeah.
Not all, there's a lot of data.
There's more.
Yeah, there's certainly more. But a couple big ones. All right, so we'll jump right in. So tonight's presentation, we've broken it down into 4 different parts. So one, we're going to kind of pause and just take a step back and talk about map growth in general and make sure that we are all kind of back on the same page of what is map growth, how is it scored, so we have an understanding as we go into the further conversation. We'll talk specific about how it is scored. And then we'll go into our data, and we're going to look at 2 different data stories, and I'll explain that further when we get to that point. And then lastly, we'll look at the takeaways and any major kind of points that jump out at us. So jumping right in, map growth is an assessment that comes from an organization called the NWEA, and it measures what students know and informs what they're ready to learn next. The really big part about map growth is that it's adaptive, it's not standard, and it's trying to figure out where students are. And so Kelly and I recently met with a few representatives from map growth, having just conversations and discussions, and what was made very, very clear time and time again is that the students are expected to actually not know about 50% of the exam because they're trying to pinpoint exactly where the student is. And so it is an interim assessment, meaning that we do it 3 times a year. So we do it in the fall, the winter, the spring, all within a testing window to touch point as to see where students are then in that moment. It is an adaptive assessment, as I just said. So what that means is that it's kind of opposite of standard, right? Where standard, everyone gets the same assessment, same questions, nothing gets changed. Adaptive means that it adapts to what the student is responding. So if the student, and the chart on the bottom right actually kind of shows how the adaptive assessment might work, right? So if we look at that chart, the student got that first question on the left, right? It was a green box. Question was right. So they provided the next question to be a little bit more difficult. Student got it right. Provided another question a little bit more difficult. Student didn't get it right. So then they adjusted and they went maybe just a little further back in the skill set, right? Didn't get it right, so they went further back again. And so the idea of that is kind of at the beginning, you'll see it's the big, kind of the bigger mountain and valley. And then the idea is to kind of level out and figure out where the students are at. So what they know, and then what they're ready to learn next. That is the real key of why we use the map growth information. It is grade level independent. So when we are looking, it does not matter whether a student is in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. They're all taking this adaptive map assessment, and that relates to the scoring, which we'll get to. And the map growth is aligned to our state learning standards. And so it is tied directly to bringing in the standards from our frameworks at the state level. The map growth does provide us with valid longitudinal data based on an equal interval scale, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But it demonstrates academic growth over time, right? We're really able to kind of hone in and see how a student has progressed over their educational experience within our school system. It provides real-time data on student mastery and achievement on standards-based content. And so once a student has completed
we've completed the testing window, educators can go right in and see where the students are, what are they kind of become proficient at, and where are they ready to learn next, and what might they be struggling with, what area they may be struggling with. The math growth assessments also identify the instructional level for each student independent of enrolled grade level. So a student, for example, might be in 3rd grade, they're doing the math assessment, and they might actually be getting questions at the 4th grade, 5th grade level because they're achieving really high. And vice versa, they might be getting questions that may be in the lower elementary level because that's where they're achieving at that point in time. So it doesn't matter what grade they're in, they're going to get questions adapted to where they are at. And then finally, the math growth is directly linked to instruction, to our learning targets, to interventions. We use this data to determine small groups within the classroom, what interventions need to be happening within those small groups to really target that information. Next slide, please, Steve. Thank you. So when we talk about scoring of math growth, the math growth assessments measure student achievement and growth using a RIT scale. And that RIT scale I always love using the picture on the bottom right because it's just like a ruler, right? It's an equal interval scale, just like feet and inches. It's not going to change in any way, shape, or form. And it doesn't matter how old you are, we can all get up against that ruler and measure our height, right? So that is the type of scale that is used for this math growth, which is why it is able to be independent of grade level. The score range is between 100 and 300. So again, what we kind of can ballpark what grade level a student would be typical up there, the grit score, but it doesn't necessarily target exactly what grade level we're in. So that's with regards to kind of giving us that background knowledge of math growth and then how the scoring happens. On the next page, we have here the 2020 national norms. These were updated recently. Every few years, NWEA goes back and just looks at the norms and how things are working and seeing, are they still the norms? These previously were 2015 norms, so they have been updated to the 2020 norms. I put this slide in here for a few reasons. One, for your own reference to be able to go back to and see the norms for all fall, winter, spring at all the grade levels. But also to point out the fact that each window for both reading and math has that standard deviation column. And anything that falls within that standard deviation number, we consider it to be within the confidence band. And so just take note, if we look just at the reading spring standard deviation column, right? The standard deviation is above 12, starts at 12 and then it just increases. So when we look at our data, right, you will see that we're going to fall within this confidence band, and thus meaning that there's nothing that's statistically significant that we would be majorly concerned about. The last reason why I put this slide in here for us is that it is national norms, right? So NWEA is a nationwide organization, and it is not used across the state of Massachusetts. It is kind of varied in districts across the state. It has increased, it is increasing in the number of districts that are using it in our state, but it's not used across the state enough to be able to provide any state data. So there's no state collected data. So that's when we do any comparisons, it's just against ourselves, which is always the comparison that we want to look at kind of first. And then it's that national. So unfortunately, there's not that middle of the ground state for us to be looking at. All right.
Can I just ask a question on that really quick? So these are the 2020 norms. So it's great that they updated it from 2015. Obviously 2020 was a weird year, but the fall numbers were normal. That was a normal fall for us, right? Because it was in March that things shifted.
So what's interesting is that the norms aren't actually one independent year. The 2020 just means the year that they put these new norms together, but they look at multiple years to gather the kind of the average of where students are at. So, but you bring up a good point, right? That these norms are, they were put out right at the beginning. So that is an interesting to just point out, but it does take several years for them to compare and look at to come up with these norms.
Okay, that's great to know. That's an average. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. All right. So now the data. If we look at the data, as I said, we're gonna look at kind of two different data stories this evening. So the first data story that we're looking at is gonna be over the next couple of slides. And over these next couple of slides, we're going to look at growth over one academic year for the past 3 years. So what that means is that we are looking at different cohorts from each academic year, right? So we're looking at the past 3 years in grade 2, which means that we're looking at different cohorts of grade 2 classes. And we can draw some grade level conclusions, right? Typically in grade 2, this is what we would say. But we do need to take caution because we're comparing different cohorts. And I think we all know you can never compare 2 kids, even if they're in the same family, in the same way, shape, or form, right? There's a lot of different things that go in there. So just remember that in this first data story, right, we're looking at varied cohorts over years. And then the second data story that we'll get into in a few slides allows us to actually dive in and follow a specific cohort over their educational experience within Littleton. And so that's the one that really you're comparing apples to apples in that situation. In this situation, we're comparing apples to oranges. So first, we're going to look at this first data story of varied cohorts over a few years. And when we look at this, we really like to look at growth, right? So looking at this table here, all the tables, first few slides are set up the same way. In the left column, we have the grade and subject. We do just reading and math in grades 2 through 8. And then in grade 9, we do just the reading math growth assessment. The far right column is the national norm column, so putting there for reference. And then those columns in between have the past 3 years, our growth from the fall assessment to the spring assessment. And then there's a column for the observed growth that happened within that year. So when we look at, specifically, if we hone in on that 22-23, which was last year, right? We notice that those students came in at a different starting point than the past 2 years, right? However, their ending point is pretty significant. So they came within, if we look at reading, for example, 1.7 of 2 years ago. That is fantastic. That is fantastic growth for that cohort of students. And 1.7 on the RIT scale is not, as we said, statistically significant. So it's really impressive that we're seeing this. And then if we look at the math, even larger growth, right, of 17.6 within just last year. And then if we look actually in the grade 2 math, one thing that we had mentioned last year during our math and our MCAS presentations is that we're trying to look for those check marks, right? Where when the pandemic hit, we were at a certain point, and then we went down. The pandemic impacted everyone very significantly. So our results were going down. We now are really hoping that we've hit that lower point that we would be at, and we're starting to see that check mark come back up, right? So I'm going to mention check mark a couple of times. And so our first beautiful example of that is grade 2 math, where we're starting to see that check mark. We're starting to see that kind of rebound, as some might say, of increasing from where we were over the past 2 years, when you could say we were a little bit maybe in the thicker of the pandemic. We know, we've said it before, we want to be above the national norm. We are significantly above the national norm, which is really wonderful. If we move on to the Russell Street data, again, we see
do you mind if we ask questions about as we go through the slides, or would you prefer to go through the?
As you go, so it's conversational, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's good.
I just have a question about this slide, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I found it very interesting that, well, I guess my first question kind of goes back to Stacey's point. I'm surprised that we have a spring 2021 score, because I didn't even think we did math testing in March of that year.
It was 2020 that we did it.
Right.
So it was
So
19,
it's March of 2020, right?
It
Okay.
was March 13th, 2020.
Sorry to have to make you think about
What's up? Yeah.
I'm trying to block it. so I'm gonna-
That's fair, that's fair. I can't block it. March 13th, 2020. Is when we closed down.
Sure.
And
Okay, so that
we
makes-
weren't able, we didn't do it. It was,
Gotcha.
that was too much for that spring. However, we did, so in 2020, 2021, it was that hybrid year, right?
Yeah.
So we did have some students who were fully remote. We did have some students who were doing the hybrid option. We were able to do MAP fully that year because NWEA responded pretty quickly
Cool.
and came out with a way for us to offer it fully virtually and have it still be valid.
Right. Okay, good. That clears that up. And you touched upon, I just want to reiterate, like the second graders in 2020 showed up with a score of 186 and the second graders last year showed up at a 181. So we're definitely seeing the fact that at this grade level, we've actually seen like a downward trend because they didn't get maybe the same quality or educational experience in kindergarten or first grade, or just the world was a different place when they were in those grades. So I think you kind of said it, but the idea here is like, I really hope that the second grade reading, when they perform the test this fall, that they score better than a 181.6, that we start to see it going back up. That's our belief, right?
I mean, yes, of course, we always hope that it's gonna continue to go up. However, I think it's also important to note it's actually that end number that, right, the growth, yes, they came in at a different spot.
Yeah.
Their experience is hard to compare to even the two cohorts before them, but they came in a different spot.
Sure.
I think what this shows, kudos to our grade 2 students and our grade 2 teachers last year,
Yeah.
who worked very hard to make that growth.
They're definitely catching the kids up.
Mhm.
And I see that, but my point was like the kindergarten, first grade, like as these cohorts have moved through those grades, there was some COVID impact and we're seeing kids show up in second grade a little less prepared as it relates to these exams. And I truly believe, because I know everyone's working their tails off,
Mhm.
that we're going to get some data for this second grade class, or hopefully definitely next year's second grade class, where we start to see an upward trend, because we do the curriculum review, we try to bring in all the technology, we're doing everything we possibly can to have our kids be successful, and we don't want to see them entering second grade at a lower and lower year. So the only way I can explain it is the fact that, you know, when these children were 4, 5, and 6 years old, they were in a sheltered place.
Yeah, I think there's definitely truth to that for sure.
Mhm.
I think we just have to be cautious of our language too, right? Of catching students up because they fell behind. They hear that and that impacts their capability and their learning, right? I'm in seventh grade, I'm already behind, right? It's not a matter of kind of, we say it catching up. I think we use that term to mean that we want them to be performing at their best where we know that they can be, and making sure that they have the full skill set to be able to get there. I agree with you. I think you're right when you say we want those students to come in from a good spot. I think their experience during the pandemic impacted
Right.
where they come into in each grade level for sure.
And
And my only other comment would be, I'm surprised that it's not the other way around, because what we heard historically was like math in the beginning is manipulatives and hands-on and all that instruction. And there really doesn't appear to be much of a problem with math. It was reading. And I remember hearing, oh, well, we could read at home and we could read on Zoom, and we read to our kids at night and all that stuff. It was just kind of weird to me that it was actually the other way.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it's interesting to just kind of put it out there, right?
Mhm.
Because we can say reading can happen at home for sure.
Yeah.
Right. But was there access to the books? Was there, right? Like, I think we made some assumptions that it could be happening at home because we made the assumption that it was kind of more accessible to be happening at home. Whereas you're right, all of a sudden it kind of
It
looked,
flipped.
yeah, it did. And it's interesting. And I think, because of that mentality, we maybe also have like really made sure we're focused on our math, and we did the curriculum review. We put new curriculum into play here. And I'm not saying that that's, we're seeing the full impact of that yet, because it's only been 1 year. So I don't
Sure.
think it's fair to say that yet. But I think they've worked hard to make sure that learning and growth is there.
I mean, we all know the pandemic was tough, but I think we also need to take a look at what these numbers mean and put some context to them. Standard deviation is an important concept. So the standard deviations that you see here are pretty well all over 10. So let's just use 10, which is minimal standard deviation in terms of this particular assessment. If you had an average RIT score of 160, you would go 10 below. So you'd start at 150, 10 above, you go to 170. So your range is 150 to 170. Within that range, there's no significant difference. And I think that's where we sometimes get caught up in a number and forget that every tool we use has a deviation, standard deviation. And so we have to be really cautious when we talk about 1, 2, 3 points when we're using standardized assessments. MCAS is the same way. I don't know exactly what their standard deviation is, but I would guess it would be above 10. And some of these standard deviations are in the high teens, which is normal for standardized assessments. I just caution you in that. I mean, nobody's saying, including me, that the pandemic wasn't hard on student learning. But if we look at MCAS, if we look at NWA, if we look at NAEP, which is a national exam, all 3 exams, the results of those exams this year have all disclosed that we are now moving forward. We're not regressing. We're all moving forward, which is significant considering it hasn't been that long since we finished the pandemic. So all those factors need to be taken into account when you look at data.
So are you saying that what we see as the observed growth could be within the standard deviation? It is.
It is.
Right. So, I mean, that makes it a little difficult to use the figures to make instructional decisions.
Well, they also have areas that show student strengths and student challenges. And that's where this data becomes powerful as well. I mean, you're not going to find a tool that's adaptive that has deviations less than this.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, even if it was a standardized exam, those deviations would be similar. Very hard to get a standard deviation under 10. Just something to think about. Because sometimes we take numbers for face value, and we always have to remember that assessment tools always have a deviation, standard deviation.
I think we can look at the observed growth somewhat outside of that standard deviation, right? The standard deviation is impacting that fall where they start. So if we look, for example, fall 2022, it's impacting that 181.6. That is around that score, right? The observed growth is outside, and it's just looking at the RIT scale of moving from 181.6 to 195. And so there's a new standard deviation around the 195 number. So I think it's hard, it's all related, but I think it's hard to compare that standard deviation with the observed growth. I think you can look at the observed growth outside of that. Justin, I appreciate your comments. I think the key, what we're all getting to, we're comparing ourselves to ourselves, and we want to constantly get better. I think we all have that same shared goal.
Sure,
and,
absolutely.
And you're pointing out that part, and I think we're just 1.6, 1.7.
Right. And again, like you had said, we want to be careful with the words that we use. I get that. Like 2 meetings ago, the high school is one of the best high schools in the state. Tonight, the middle school is one of the best. Like, it's hard to find areas to critique. And I just share that with you that it's nothing personal. It's just, hey, I found this interesting that the second grade class year after year is showing up with a starting place that's less and less. And 95% of the time we're knocking out of the park. So no one please take offense to that.
Right.
But we got to try to find some areas to get better. And that might be one of the places where we want to take a look at what's going on.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Good.
If we look at Russell Street, right, we're seeing overall similar themes. They're coming into the school year kind of at a slightly more typical, really, there's nothing significantly different with regards to where they're coming in on the RIT scale. And then if we look at the observed growth, again, the students are really making wonderful growth. We're making wonderful progress. One thing to note is that and this happens every year, this is typical for us, our youngest learners make the most growth. It makes a bit of sense because they are making really big gains and learning how to read, learning how to comprehend, learning the fundamentals of reading and math. And so you will see that our growth is starting to become less as we progress up through the 9th grade. But yet, still want to point out, we're making typical growth. We're making strong growth in grades 3 through 5. And again, we're strongly above the national norm, as we would continue to expect to be. And we have a couple of check marks to look at, right? Grade 3 math, we're on that rebound, it's looking great. Grade 5 reading, it's on the rebound, it's looking great. Grade 4 math needs fantastic growth. I can't express grade 3 math, fantastic growth. Grade 2 math, not for about again, but fantastic growth in 1 year. Moving on to the middle school. Again, similar story. When we're looking at this, the students were coming into these grade levels with strong grit scores. We were seeing typical growth. Like we just said, the growth starts to get less as we go older in our grades. We're well above the national norm. And what I think is really wonderful about the middle school and the data that we see here is that almost every row is a check mark. So every row, we're kind of starting to see that rebound, which is quite impressive. And when I say that, what I mean is if we look grade 6 reading, for example, in the spring of 2021, it was 223. In the spring of 2023, it was 223.4. So we're increasing, we're starting to go back up. So that's that check mark. That's what we're really hoping to start to see more frequently.
Can I just stop you for a second? So what is interesting about these two charts where you're taking one cohort and following them over the span of 3 years, like you can really see the summer slump. That like they test higher in the spring and then they come back the following fall and they're a little bit lower.
You gotta move diagonally to do that.
Oh, right.
You're gonna get there though.
Right, okay. Right. I see what you're saying.
A lot of data.
Yeah, oh, no, thank you, I appreciate that.
You do
So,
get to
There
go
is
over
the
into
summer
Sonic.
slump, which is wow.
right, exactly, now that I'm looking at it diagonally,
Yeah.
there is
Yeah,
a
there's-
slump,
it is-
so yay.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's what I think the data overall, we'll get to this takeaway at the end. I really think we should be really happy and proud of where our students are at. That's not to say that we can't find, areas in which we can improve. Of course we can. We want to make sure that we're continuing that improvement. But I think we're at a point where,
fantastic.
I think we need
Yeah.
to applaud the effort that have gone in to get us to where we are at this point in time. So if we go into the high school then, like I said, the high school grade 9 is the only one that assesses in reading. We had tried to do it before in the older grades, just didn't find it really that as beneficial in the older grade. In grade 9, it really is used to kind of really target and identify the skills of where the students are at, what they can do well and proficiently, and where they need a little bit of support. Again, you're comparing different cohorts. So you're looking at students progressively becoming further and further from the heart of the pandemic. So very different experiences within their middle school, late elementary years. I do want to point out, right, that the RIT scale, if we look at the RIT scale, yes, it's not as high, right? That cohort was not achieving at the higher level that was happening the past 2 years. However, that cohort also made the most significant growth. It was just one, but it still was good, which is wonderful and exactly what we are hoping to see. And then again, compare against the national norm, we're above that without concern. That's the first data story, right? So that's the apples to oranges. We're kind of just looking at the grade level, what we typically see when we're looking at these grade levels. So now we're going to jump into the second data story. And this allows us to follow a cohort of students over their educational experience. So over the years, we're tracking on this chart where they started years ago and where they are now with regards to these assessments. So this is over the next few slides. We're going to see one slide for every grade level that took the assessment last year. So looking at this is our class of 2026. They were 9th graders last year. They're our current 10th graders. If we are looking at this, right? So the RIT score is on the left side. And then across the bottom, so if we're looking at 22, 23, that's their 9th grade year. And then we progressively go back. So 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th. So we're tracking all the way back from their 4th grade year. The reading in blue and where those circles are their spring scores. So spring of 2018, they were 215.3. Spring of 2019, they were right around the 218. The one number that got blocked from that norm. Lynn and I were spending probably too much time trying to figure it out. I realized I just had to accept it and move on. But they're right there. If that the 218. The fainter lines that are in the back, right, are actually trend lines that are created based on the data. So ideally, we want to see that trend line consistently going up at some sort of trajectory, right? What we do not want to see is that then all of a sudden going down. You'll notice that our trend lines look very nice. They're constantly going up to some degree. This is a cohort that we obviously have a lot of years for. And so their blue data that is in here is their reading data over the years. The red lines are their math data over the years. And then the yellow is the national norm of reading and the green is the national norm for math. Just to orient ourselves, right? If we're looking just Littleton data, we're just looking at blue and red. The national norms are the green or gold.
Can I just ask a question about this? Just to make sure I'm reading this right.
Yeah.
So if we're trying to compare our national norms for like reading, we would compare the blue line to the yellow line.
Correct.
So we would be above the national norm for reading.
Yes.
And then for math, it would be red versus the yellow, red versus the green, and we're above national norm. Okay,
You got it. Exactly. And so you'll see kind of at times those two lines get closer together and then they come further apart, right? 21, 22. We kind of see that example. What's really interesting is out of the 20. So that the national norm actually declines, which is interesting in and of itself, that at the national level, that went down. Our students are not showing that they follow that in the national way, that they're not declining. So that is good performance for our students.
If our data looked like the national norms, we would be concerned.
Thank you. So we have this for all of our grade levels, right? So class of 2027, these are our current 9th graders. So again, looking down at the bottom, we go from their 8th grade year all the way back to their 2nd grade year. So this is an interesting because we're able to see all from when they started math growth in grade 2 all the way up through last year of their 8th grade year. So this is kind of the full trajectory of our students that we see. So these are the current 9th graders. They'll be taking the reading this year. But again, we look at this and we're seeing the trajectory of where we want to see. The lines are going up. At times it's going to be varied, but it kind of writes itself and continues to go in that upward, constantly progressing movement of what we want and expect for our students to see. If we continue on, class of 2028, these are our current 8th graders. So again, we're looking down at the bottom and see 7th grade back to their 2nd grade year. When we look at this one, kind of does jump out to us a bit, that 2020 to 2021, 21, 22, that isn't as upwards as we were thinking or wanting it to be. That's pandemic. That's data that we have seen in MCAS. That doesn't come as a surprise to us, that we have been working on and working on improving. And what's nice is that you do then see from 21, 22 to 22, 23, it does kind of make that jump back up. especially with regards to math. So that is really nice to be able to see. And again, that's kind of that check mark that we're looking for, right? Of that it's kind of going back up there. Class of 2029, these are our current 7th graders. So again, at the bottom, we're going from 6th grade on the right all the way down to their 2nd grade year. Their 2nd grade year, they were able to complete their 2nd year doing that growth was that pandemic, which is why in all these charts, that's kind of a blank year because we didn't do any spring assessing. Again, we're seeing good progress. We're seeing those trend lines do what we want them to do, expected growth moving up. The next one, class of 2030, our current 6th graders. So they are 5th grade on the right, down to the 2nd grade on the left. So they really got the first time that they were able to do spring and we were able to really have full year data for them was when they were in 3rd grade. And so again, we see that trajectory. We're on a good trajectory, looking up exactly kind of where we want it to be for the data. And it starts to get a bit repetitive because we're seeing what we want to see within each cohort, right? So what's nice is that we're following and able to kind of see year after year of the students, and we're seeing that line go progressively up and to the right. So our current 5th graders for the class of 2031, we have 3 years of data on these ones. 4th grade all the way back to 2nd grade. Again, really nice progress moving up. Class of 2032 are our current 4th graders. Again, 2 data points. The trend line looks nice. It's only 2 years. It's really hard to even call it a trend line at this point. And then finally, our class of 2033, our current 3rd graders, they took it the first time last year. But what's nice is that as we continue to move forward, we'll be able to fill in these charts and really see their trajectory to the point where they look like our current 8th graders, our current 9th graders as a full chart of that constant forward progress. So that's our second data story with regards to the math growth for this year. So lastly, for some takeaways, while we want to be comparing against ourselves on this, I think it's important to note that we are above consistently the national average in both reading and in math. We are consistently demonstrating growth year over year, and especially when we're looking at the cohorts compared to themselves, they are making progress year over year. They're making expected progress, especially now the further we're kind of getting from the heart of March 13th, 2020. We're making that expected progress. The last 2 data points here I think are interesting, and I wanted to share with you all, is that in math, 74% of our students, this is 2 through 8, combination of all, our students are at or above the grade level mean RIT score. So 3/4 of our students. In reading, 75%, and 3/4 of our students are at or above the grade level RIT score. That is very impressive. I think it's great. Kudos for that. What's also interesting is that next part. So before I provide the actual data point, I want you to look at the bar, the colored bar that's there. You see that gold yellow color in the middle. So that is our average, right? 41 to 60s, that's straight in the middle average. You can see on the right, that green box, that's our high average performance, right? And then on the left side is that orange box of low average. What's important to note is that 21st to 80th percentile, that's all average. It all falls in average, right? And then the blue is above average. Those are higher than 80th percentile. Those are above average performers. And then the red are below that 21st percentile. Those are our lower performers who might be behind, right? Behind grade level. And so when we look at this, right, if we're considering 21st percentile above is all average or above average, 93% of our students are performing average to above average in both math and reading. And I want to make sure that got expressed out. I just heard Lynn Snow say, way to go Tigers. I want to highlight that because I think, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of hard work has been put into this. And so for me, kind of huge takeaway is that we are seeing those check marks. We are seeing that rebounding, that coming back, and kind of showing up and working hard. And that hard work is happening from our students, from our staff, from our families. I think this data is good data. It's exciting data, and it's showing all the hard work that people have been putting in over the past year specifically, but past handful of years for sure. Happy to answer any other questions.
Great presentation. I'm sure we have a couple questions. Ali, you
Yeah,
wanna start?
well, I'm curious. I mean, I think that the quality of the data that you're getting is it's so interesting to me about the implications in the classroom, that if you're getting this adaptive data for each student that says exactly what they need, you know, the implications for instruction, you know, if teachers have access to that data and can use it to tailor the instruction for every student. And I'm sort of imagining like a workshop model where the teacher's able to form small groups based on students' needs in different areas. And, you know, so would you say that the high scores that we're seeing, all the improvement, much of it is linked back to the fact that students are in a very targeted way getting what they need in the classroom due to this data?
I think that's part of it for sure. And I think this is a piece of data, right? I think the other data kind of mimics the MCAS and all it. The data kind of aligns and speaks equally with regards to the results. And so I think it's being able to, what's nice about the math growth is that we do receive that data faster than we receive other pieces of data. And so we are able to really target in that way. So yes, I do think that's part of it for sure, because our teachers are identifying that a particular either group or maybe their whole class actually is proficient in the skill. They're not going to spend the days teaching that skill because
I mean, in that way, this data is so much better than MCAS data because you can't really use MCAS data to inform instruction to help that cohort. You know, those students have already moved on to the next grade level. So this seems really valuable. And also that is part of the PD time that teachers are spending together collaborating. Is it helping them with teaching strategies to use this data? Because it's not a traditional way of teaching, you know, where everybody's expected to do the same thing. This is using this in an adaptive way is maybe a new skill for some teachers.
And I think that's partially why we brought in UDL and we've made this push for UDL for so many years, right? Is to be able to be responsive to the students that are in front of you by using the data that they're producing for you, right? And so using the UDL strategies to be able to teach in a way that supports students for directly what they need to be able to target those skills. We have we're focusing again on our data and on our really analyzing data as teams this year. And so kind of bringing our minds, circling back to being able to, let's come to the table, let's put out the data. What do we notice? What do we see? What can we infer from it? And what do we take from here? I know that happened when Map Growth was first brought in. That was pre me in this position. It's been a little while since we've kind of gone back to the roots, and our goal of ours over the next bit of time is to be able to do that. It won't happen overnight. That's another learned skill to kind of refresh.
It's been about 9 years of transition too in our district. So we're in a good spot. And we're in a real good spot to implement UDL because we've been using this as a primary assessment to guide instruction. So it was all planned, you know, in terms of long term. And we're all excited about UDL because it encompasses more than academics. It targets the whole child. So we're super excited about continuing to move forward.
Yeah, I love the way it aligns with the map data that you're getting. And great job explaining a very complicated subject in a very clear way. Like
Thank you.
really.
Thank you. Well, I have to say that it is at times a team effort at central office of bouncing ideas and making sure that if I say it this way, so.
Well, it
thank
was
you.
just
Thank
like,
you on
I was
behalf of-
getting questions and then like the next sentence out of your mouth was then answering that question. So I'm like, okay, I'm following this.
Yeah.
And don't
Thank
think we get perplexed at times too, when we're looking at all this data.
No, it was a very clear presentation, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You may have touched on this, but I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. So I remember hearing in years past, just want to confirm that we do receive individual results and we're able to make decisions for individual students based upon the results that we get.
We use them to support progress monitoring. but
Okay.
For kids on IEPs, but obviously other students as well, but to have that data at the individual student level and to look at their growth and have it be also an adaptive measure. I feel very lucky that we have.
And when we dive in and look at, I mean, we're seeing the whole district, right? But
Correct, yeah.
a classroom educator is seeing their direct class.
That's kind of my point. It's like the district results look great, but I just wanted to make sure that we were using that professional development time in those team meetings to say, hey, look, I've got a group of students where I'm not seeing the progress like the rest of my class. Your point about UDL is how can we be giving them the information in a different fashion or allowing them to consume the material in a different way so that they can, have a second shot at it.
Exactly. And what's interesting when you bring that up, right, is at times when you're looking at your class of 24 students, 22 students, whatever it may be, right? Your students that are kind of, when you're looking at your group, they're the lower performing students. Sometimes they're still at the 50th, 60th percentile, right? So we're like, oh my goodness, they are performing low with this cohort of the class, but they're actually right on in where they should be. So at times it's also, it's important to look at individual teacher by teacher, but then it's what's really nice is being able to come together for those team meetings to see everyone as a whole and realize, oh, the individual that I was a little bit concerned about, big picture here, I'm able to maybe use some UDL strategies to really target in the classroom.
Sure.
And then at the individual student, like sometimes we have students that are in that lower quartile, but their student growth could be at the 84th or 99th percentile. So the growth that we're measuring them against themselves is incredible. Then conversely, we're able to see if they're not making, if their growth isn't, they're not making expected progress. We're able to go back and look, do we need to add an additional IEP goal? Do we need to add objectives in this specific area? Because we can look down to the specific
Standards,
and
skill set.
yes, that they're struggling.
You can tell we talk about this.
And then I appreciate, I love all the data, data person. So I wonder if you guys have this or if you could share it with us at some point. So I get that when you went over the 74, 75, 93, 93, like I know where 7% of the students are because they're in that bottom fifth. Do we have the data on where everybody else falls in the next category? I'm just wondering if there's like
Oh, yeah.
a couple students or like a group of students that are really pulling the grade level up because we've got some high performers.
I see, yeah.
I'm kind of interested, like what the average student is doing.
About this, like your iPhone, like when it says what your memory is, like how many are falling in each of those individual bands.
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
scatter
percent,
plot
yeah.
for,
I don't have the data in front of me, however.
I'd love to see it at some
Yeah,
point.
I can tell you that it's more evenly distributed than you might think or expect.
Yeah.
I would expect a bell curve.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So I don't think we have necessarily, too many.
Just wanted to like
cohorts,
look
but-
for outliers on the high end, just make sure that they're not artificially inflating the cohorts number.
Yeah.
That's curious.
Yeah.
This?
Or vice
Yeah.
versa.
Well, I know where the bottom, I know that it's only 7% in the bottom.
Yeah.
So maybe it should be 7% at the top and then,
Right,
But
and I think what Elaine is saying is that, or in a low average, pulling down. That,
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so I do have a few questions. So I think obviously we see a trend upwards, which is wonderful. And you guys are all putting a lot of work into this. This is a lot of data to put together. So thank you so much for putting it together in a very comprehensive way. So I was actually looking at the notes from last year and saw a few differences. So I wasn't sure if you guys had compared your presentation from last year from some of the stats that you gave us this year. So I don't know if I'm comparing the same statistics. And you probably aren't going to know offhand. but.
Go.
So last year I had as some like highlights for that presentation that district-wide, 16% of our students were testing below average in reading and 10% were below average in math. And I remember we had that discussion because we were talking about our special ed students and making sure that we were catching them up or making sure that they were catching up. And now I see that we have 7% aren't scoring average. So is that, I don't know if those are comparable numbers. I don't know if it's the same as the low average and above.
I would have to go back and just
Yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
before, but 2 items to note, one of which, man, I love our team. John happened to just say it, is that we do have, it's not exactly the same cohort of students that we're comparing. So we do have to be careful, right? We have a
Right.
new cohort of students that came in to grade 2.
Yeah.
And then a cohort that left that. So the numbers from last year, while the majority of students are the same.
Yeah.
It is a slightly different cohort.
Yeah.
And I would have to go back to the presentation to
Yeah.
make sure, but if that's the general overview, then yes, our numbers are of below average students. We are decreasing that.
They're
number,
decreasing
which is-
that number. Yeah,
We're
that's what, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to just highlight. If that is the case, that is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah,
It'd be great for you guys to pinpoint like what that actual percentage, because I'm sure if it's that big of a gap between last year's percentage below average and this year, that's a huge accomplishment to bring us up there. So either way, that's really fantastic. And then like another set that I had from last year was that I think we had like between all the schools, 33 to 40% were achieving above grade level. That was the stats from last year's math testing. And I understand again, it's a different cohort, but now we have 93% that are scoring above, or 74 that are scoring above grade level in math and reading, which again is another huge increase, but one for you guys to look at to make sure I'm like comparing the different numbers, but I'm seeing really huge bumps in progress. So I think they are similar statistics or they're aligning well. Those are really great things for you guys to look back at and just take a look and confirm that. Yeah, I'd be even doing even better than you think, but I think you guys are doing great. And again, thank you for putting all this together because it's a lot to dig into. It's complex to figure out who you're looking at and the different years and stuff. And then
we
you throw
enjoy
COVID in that, it's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I appreciate what you're saying too, because sometimes we forget to kind of pause and celebrate the work that we're doing. And so thank you for pausing
Yes.
and letting us kind of acknowledge and celebrate that work. I think that's important and something I will certainly bring back.
Yes, yeah, okay, thank you.
I pulled up the presentation from last year.
So here we go.
So just some like really good feedback.
Here.
Last year's presentation, the cohorts were color coded, so you can
Yes.
follow them along,
Yeah.
which is really cool. You might want to consider
That would
doing
help with
that.
my
I look very
SummerSlam
helpful.
comment.
You might want to consider doing that going forward.
I don't know how long we talked about.
I'm sure. And then the question that I had about where each percentage of people fall in that category was in last year's presentation as well.
Yes.
So, would be great to have next year. Yeah, that's a nice view. Good way to put it.
So interesting, we actually had that, so now we're talking about presentation style. And
Sure.
but I'm happy to do that too. We went back and forth and presenting it in this 2 different chart format, I thought was going to be easier to kind of follow as opposed to go right and down. And then in your brain, you have to figure out kind of the, we thought maybe if I can put both in.
I liked it. We all liked this year's presentation too. I just was, when I
It's
pulled it
like
up, I'm
last
like,
year.
oh, the color.
Yeah, last year I think was
It's all
easier to
good.
follow for me personally. I liked last year.
Okay.
It gave me a bit better picture of like where we were. Great, but just, yeah,
Okay.
it was, I mean, this is great. I don't know who won that bet as to which presentation was.
Oh, we're not gonna disclose it.
But this is really.
Just
good.
say Kelly.
Yes.
Yeah, they're just like-
Yeah.
Well, with the good things happening for all of I'm happy. So
Yeah.
it's okay, no
But
matter what.
I'm impressed that you looked at last year's data.
I know, I
Awesome.
it's tasty.
Yeah.
I like data.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Jen may have had to drop off, so. Wonderful presentation this evening. That wraps up the presentation portion of the evening, so we will see if we have any interested citizens before us this evening, either in the room or at home that wish to speak for the school committee.
You do know.
Dorothy's always quick to close the floor on that. All right, hearing from no one, we will move on. We'll be wrapping up shortly. So we've got subcommittee reports. We'll start with PNBC.
The only update I have is on the high school roof, which is still being worked on. It's not completed yet. We have a lot of rain this summer. But just notes on that. So they are starting installation on the snow melt system next week. And then we're still waiting on materials for another portion of the roof, which should be coming in October 24th. So then once they get those materials in, then they're going to start to work on that. So it will be done. We've been assured that it will be done before snow, as long as we don't get snow on Halloween, like we did a few years ago. So other than that, work in progress.
What's gonna be done first, the Russell Street, street or the high school roof?
Hopefully there is.
All right,
both.
yeah, we need both, then ASAP. All right, the budget subcommittee, we can report that we've got a meeting scheduled for October 3rd at 3 p.m. That'll take place at the superintendent's office, and we will post that as that's an open meeting. Which we're going to begin our budgeting process, and then the next one here is policy subcommittee. Do you have anything to report or no report for policy? And the Shaker Lane Building Committee?
As far as I know, I think there's no updates that I'm aware of other than.
Well, so I
We
can
haven't
give
talked
a,
about already.
Steve's and
yeah, I can,
Ryan have been working on
Okay.
the latest form we need to fill out.
yeah, so we interviewed prospective, or the committee, the subcommittee, the selection committee interviewed the prospective OPM firms, narrowed it down to 3, interviewed, selected one. We've negotiated with that one firm and have contract price. We're now in the process of finalizing a document that narrates that whole process to MSBA. We're getting ready to submit that process, that form. Once we submit that form, we will be invited to the November 2nd MSBA meeting where they then approve the OPM selection that we've made. Once that happens, then we can sign the contract with the OPM and then start moving forward on finding a designer and an architect to do the feasibility study, and then really move forward on making progress on the building and what's going to happen to it. So we're still kind of in the OPM stage and finalizing that, but MSBA had very strict rules and guidelines and timelines that we have to follow in order for them to approve it, so that they approve the percentage of the funds that they're going to reimburse us for. So they kind of go hand in hand. So that's where we're at. So that document, Ryan and I finalized most of it. It's about 95% of the way there, maybe 98% with just a couple of tweaks to it. We hope to get that into MSBA next week. The deadline to get that into them is October 11th, so we're still ahead of schedule. So that's where we're at. And then we think we're going to have a building committee meeting. We're working on that date. So that should be maybe next week or the week after. So that's where we're at.
Perfect. And it's kind of along the same topic of just, I'll just announce, we got a couple emails this week as it relates to, like, there must have been like a lively discussion at the planning board or something like that. So interested citizens reach out to school committees to suggest that open lines of communication remain between the select board, the planning board, the school committee, as it relates to some of the projects coming into town and with Shaker Lane School. So Stacy and I are going to look at the minutes or try to review that meeting.
Yeah, we have a member of the selectmen on the Shaker Lane Building Committee.
Yep.
And Ryan, the interim business town
administrator.
administrator, is also on the building
Perfect.
committee. So hopefully those lines of communication are taking place.
Great. And I reached out to Maren Tuhil, the town planner. So I'm going to just meet with her next week just to kind of get caught up to speed, because like everybody knows, it's kind of difficult to take in all these meetings that are taking place all over town. So
And let her know if she wants. I'm happy to sit with her.
great. We don't have any further business before us. I will ask for a motion to adjourn,
I move that we adjourn.
made by Elaine,
I'll second that.
seconded by Stacy. Dorothy, do we still have Jen with us?
I'm here.
Oh, all right. I just didn't see on the panel.
That's okay.
We're going to close this by a roll call vote. So there's a motion to adjourn in a second. Jen,
Jen Gold says yes.
Stacy,
Stacy, yes.
Elaine,
Elaine, yes.
and Justin says yes as well. So we have adjourned. Thank you very much. 8:24.
Nice.
Yeah.